So here we are with the last question that didn't get addressed yesterday, and it kind of comes off another question that got asked after the sermon yesterday, and it's about sexuality and government. So the question yesterday was, how do we deal with a government that supports same-sex marriage if we in the church don't? And I touched on that briefly without getting too deep into the issue of sexuality because I didn't want it to take away from just focusing on Jesus and government. But another question came in, and it reads this: how should the church handle any disagreement with the government about sexuality? And how do we respond to the new sex ed curriculum being taught in the schools? Um, First off, I would just mention that we have covered this and talked about it at New Life, and so we're not afraid to talk about that. We've done some special evenings in the past 6 months or so, one specifically on sexuality and one on dealing with the new Ontario curriculum as a way to help parents navigate that. So essentially dealing with the issue about gay marriage and homosexuality, a few responses I would make without getting too deep into this at this time is one, as a Christian, I never expect people who do not share my faith to live out my morality, which is based on my faith and based on the scriptures. So if there's a government that wouldn't necessarily say we adhere to the Christian faith and uphold all Christian values, I wouldn't expect that government to then put forth all of their legislation to be in line with what I think should be. And so, part of our government has the sense of freedom to live your life as you wish without breaking any laws, and therefore not to face discrimination or of any means. And I think that does apply to people who may not share our views of sexuality. So I think what the government is doing is what they should be doing. And if we disagree with them, I think we engage in that conversation, in that debate. And actually, I think we need to be thankful that the government is doing the best they can to balance the tension between freedom of expression, of sexual expression, and freedom of religion, and trying to work with both camps on that. And I think when it comes to that issue, just a general principle is that we really do need to be people of love. And that, as Paul wrote in Romans 13, love does no harm to its neighbor, so love is the fulfillment of the law. And we can get into all the conversations that I think are important, the difference between acceptance and agreement, and how we often confuse that. I think in the church we need to be careful about the message that we're giving, because I think often we're giving a message of hatred and of not wanting to associate with people that don't share our values. And I don't think that's at all what Jesus calls us to. But I do think there's good conversation to be had about agreement and acceptance and the difference between those two things. When it comes to the sex ed curriculum, again, I think there was a lot of stuff that was being put out there that wasn't accurate. And I think the government's trying to update the curriculum to help families and children in today's day and age. And I commend them for that. I may not agree with everything that's in the curriculum, but my response would be simply to say to parents, get to know your school, get to know your principal and your teachers. Don't let the first time they hear from you to be when you're calling them and blasting them about what you don't like in a curriculum that you may or may not have even read. So work with them. I think more often than not, they're willing to work with you. And if there are things that you're not in agreement about, then talk with them about that, but do it in a relational kind of way. And certainly talk about sex with your children at home and not just wait to have them experience that in the playground or in the classroom. And let's not forget the conversations that kids are having in the playground. So I'm glad that there are responsible adults trying to help our children learn about this. But I think it's also our role to talk about sex at home in a safe environment where kids can ask the questions that they want to ask without feeling chastised. And so that means as parents, we have to do our homework and then teach our children what we feel are the biblical values they need to know. Always couched in the term of how God reveals himself as a God of compassion and mercy and love and patience for all people. And that we continue to live the same principle of loving other people because love does no harm to its neighbor. And I think that's a good message for us to embrace as a church. So hopefully that addresses the question. Next week, we'll talk about justice and violence, and I'm sure that that'll spark more questions for you. So until next Monday morning, enjoy the week, and hopefully we'll see you on Sunday. God bless.